How is everybody? Oops.
Good.
Can hear me? I'm trying to send out the invitation again. Somebody told me they couldn't get access to it, so. Okay. All right, hopefully that will get other folks in here. Hi, Caitlin, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Daphne, how are you doing?
I'm good.
That's good. Morgan, how are you?
Good.
Morgan Graham. I don't know if that was the other Morgan.
Yeah, that was me.
Okay. I want to get view here to get everybody up here. Try not to look too excited, Aubrey Harriman. How are you doing, Audrey? I see you got the message, or you found the old one.
Yeah, I'm good.
Olivia, you doing all right? Carpenter?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. Emma, you doing all right? You might be muted. Some of you are on mute. So if you are, you can unmute yourselves. There's a little, should be a little microphone toward the left bottom corner of the screen. How are you, Dominic?
Oh, not too bad.
Okie dokie. Is that Brendan?
Yep, I'm here.
Didn't recognize you without your hat.
Yeah.
Nick, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
You got my emails?
Yeah.
Caitlin Johnston, you all right? You there?
Yep.
Isaiah,
Yep.
Morgan Dobbs,
Hello.
Isaac,
Hello.
you got a hoodie on?
Yes, sir.
We'll catch you one day. Jared, how are you?
Well, I'm good. I'm hanging in there.
Blake,
Yep.
Olivia Stoll, you there, Olivia?
Mic doesn't work.
Let's see if I can unmute her. Olivia Stoll, you there? Okie dokie. Bella, you there?
Hi.
Hi. Austin,
Yeah, I'm here.
good. Serena,
Hi.
hi. Caitlin Krogh,
Hi.
hi. Okay, let's see. We have most everybody here. All righty. Well, I've released your grades for the Misunderstood Minds paper, so you can check those. I was pretty gentle. Some of you had some pretty brief answers, but I didn't beat anybody up given the fact that quite a few of you had not such great scores in the last couple of or the last quiz. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep tabs on who all's there, and I'm going to unmute everybody, okay? Then I'll mute if I hear a lot of background noise and that kind of stuff that's interfering with folks. How are you doing, Sydney?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Nita, you okay?
I'm good, thank you.
Are you in Italy?
No, I'm in Mexico.
You're in Mexico, okay.
Yeah.
All
Was the
righty.
other way.
And let's see, who else do we have? Hannah Jacobs, you're there?
Yep.
Okie dokie. All right, let me see. I think I might have. Oh, Olivia, your microphone's not working. Okay. Send others messages by chat if you need to. Leslie, how are you?
Good. Thank you.
All righty. So, Misunderstood Minds is graded. I'm going to hopefully have your NIH presentations, whichever way you submitted, done before next week. And I'm going to give you a decision on whether or not there's going to be a final assignment by next Wednesday, so you'll know exactly where you stand. I'm still thinking on that. It won't be a final exam, as I've mentioned in the last meeting. So let me go over a few brief things with Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. Can you access the lectures on YouTube? Yes? Okay. Good. So here's what I want to stress. The first thing is with the Chapter 6, the emotional behavioral disorders. And you might want to just jot down a few notes, but I'm going to send out a study guide as well that will focus in. I'm not really concerned that you remember that whole long definition. It's pretty lengthy. What I do want you to pay attention to from that definition is the idea that whatever the behaviors are that are being displayed, they're to a marked degree, meaning they're more pronounced than you would generally see from a child or adolescent at that age, okay? The second is for a long period of time. And The third is under normal circumstances. So, in other words, the behavior is exaggerated. It's for a long period of time, and it's under normal circumstances. And you certainly can see that in that Chaz Petrella video, that he has catastrophic reactions to things, just, terrible outbursts that are described. You can see it when I think his father or mother video recorded one of them. So those are examples, normal circumstances, but just completely off the charts in terms of, in comparison to the way most kids his age would be reacting. If you haven't watched that video, you better, because there'll be an item or two on the quiz related to the Chaz Petrella story, okay? So make sure that you keep up with that. The other point that I'd like to make or focus on for this morning from chapter 6 is this idea of internalizing and externalizing disorders. Not concerned really that you remember or dig into the dimensional kinds of definitions. As I point out, I believe in the lecture, there's a diagnostic and statistical manual that's used by mental health professionals to diagnose everything from alcohol use disorder to schizophrenia to depression to anxiety, you name it. All the mental health conditions are described, and that's really where those are going. And that's complicated, and none of us, I don't think, are qualified to really use that kind of information. But the internalizing and the externalizing are things that we can really understand. The internalizing disorder, the idea is this is an issue that primarily affects that child or adolescent, or the adult for that matter. So it becomes conditions. The two biggest are depression and anxiety, particularly among adolescents. In other words, a person may be able to hide, in a sense, their anxiety or their depression. And this is why they go under-identified in schools, okay? Because they don't cause problems for other people as a rule. The externalizing disorders are usually the kids that get identified for special ed. And this is just acting out behavior. Inappropriate conversations with adults where they may curse or talk to adults like they were talking to their friends out in the neighborhood. They may engage in, disruptive behavior, disrupting the class and not getting work done or refusing to do work. Kind of all the things that we see with Adam Berg in Misunderstood Minds, that he has a specific learning disability, but you can see how that's translated to all these externalizing behaviors, stealing and skipping school and so on, that has a major impact on his family as well. So those are the kids that get identified. A couple of other points I want to make about school or schooling. One of the biggest problems with this population of students is, especially with the externalizing disorders, they can be so disruptive that the schools pretty much just say, we're going to have to move this student into a self-contained special ed classroom because they're disrupting the learning of everybody else in their regular ed classes. This group of students probably gets put in self-contained classes maybe more than any other group. And the issue with that is there are two issues with that. One can understand why, because you can't, this child, even if they're on an IEP, their educational needs don't supersede everybody else's needs, particularly if they create an unsafe environment. In other words, they fight, threaten, and those kinds of things. But then the problem is if you put them in a class with everybody else who's just like they are or has similar kinds of problems, then you have no good role models, and the class just becomes a complete emphasis on behavior. It often ignores their academics. So this is the group that probably causes more school administrators and teachers to just pull their hair out. Right? It's hard to figure out what to do with some of these students. And you certainly see that with Chaz, right? He goes to special schools and so forth. It's hard to know. Sophia, I forgot to admit you. You there, Sophia?
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Forgot to admit you. Sorry about that.
I moved a ton of furniture. Like, I moved my professor out of his house in Wellsburg, and then yesterday I moved him.
Whoever that is, we can all hear you about your professor in Wellsburg. Is that right? Who was that?
Hey,
Who's me?
Isaiah.
Oh, Isaiah.
I
Okay.
moved Professor West out of his house yesterday.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
Hi, Dr.
that's interesting. Just remember, if you're unmuted, everybody can hear you. So anyway, the other thing about this population that can really challenge you as a teacher, or really it doesn't matter, whatever profession you're in, is not to take their behavior personally. And that isn't always easy to do. If somebody walks in the room and calls you names and, et cetera, it gets hard not to take it personally. But again, you look at a story like Chaz's story, you look at Adam, and you can see it. It isn't necessarily they're really angry at the people around them. They just, things are just getting out of control for them. So that's the big point on chapter 6. It's just from an educational viewpoint. Just don't take their behavior personally. Treat it professionally, and try to separate the behavior from the person. All righty. Any questions from chapter 6 that anybody has? Well, that's okay. Very good. So chapter 7. This is going to be chapter 7. Caitlin, did you have a question? Johnston?
No.
Okay.
Dr.
All righty.
Richard.
Okay. So in the next 4 chapters, 7, 8, 9, and 10, the videos are going to be a big part of the information for those chapters, okay? Because they tend to get into some technical information. The authors, including me, tends to get into a little more technical information than maybe all general educators know. So the videos help in terms of reading. So when you see the videos, it really helps to explain what's in the PowerPoints and what's in the text. Here's the main points from chapter 7, or some of the main points. The first is some states call this category speech and language disorders or speech and language impairments. Others call them communication disorders, but we're still talking about the same thing regardless of the terminology. I'm going to use speech and language. So it's important to understand that a student can have a speech disorder. A student could have no language disorder. A student could have language disorders, but no speech disorder. And a student could have both of those. They could have both speech and language issues. So the students who have both of them, that really tends to be a little more the students with intellectual disabilities. A big aspect of service in the schools for this population is that speech and language pathologists often are working mainly with children with speech disorders and not as much necessarily with language disorders. Doesn't mean they don't consult and don't help, but language disorders, Adam Berg has a language disorder. Nathan Van Hoy, the other case study, has a language disorder. Lauren has language issues. I say disorders, but they have issues with using language, because language involves two areas: receptive language, what you understand by hearing and by reading, okay? What you take in. You can have expressive language disorders, which have to do with writing and what you can say orally. Let me be real clear. When I say what you can say orally, it doesn't mean that the person may not have perfectly fine speech. In other words, there's no problems with their ability to pronounce words and so on. It has more to do with how they put messages together and how well they can convey orally or in writing what they're actually thinking or what they want to communicate to other people. If you watch the short video of the little girl, I think she's 8 years old, and I can't recall her name now. She has kind of a deep voice for an 8-year-old, but she's retelling a book that she's read. I don't know if any of you have observed that yet, but that's a good example of expressive language disorder. You will literally watch this girl and you can see the wheels turning inside her head, that she knows the story, but in trying to retell it, she's got things out of sequence. She doesn't explain it well. She doesn't give a lot of detail. It really would be incomprehensible. You would have no idea really what the story was about based on what she tells you. And that's a good example of a language disorder, expressive language disorder. So then we get to speech. And there are videos for all three of these types of speech disorders. So, well, let me go back to language for a second. You can also see expressive language when you saw Adam Berg trying to spell. You see Nathan had to have a scribe for his end of year achievement test in English language arts. And those are clearly accommodations to, with Nathan, clearly an accommodation to deal with an expressive language issue. So now speech, there are three types of speech disorders. The most common is an articulation disorder. And these are what speech and language pathologist. Oops, somebody else waiting to get in. Lacey. Hi, Lacey. You there? No, maybe not. Anyway, articulation disorders have to do with the way
Dr. Richards?
yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Somehow, I don't know. For some reason, everything got muted. Okay. I'm going to unmute everybody again. Maybe I hit the wrong button. Are you there now, Lacey? Still don't hear.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right. So back to speech. Articulation disorders are the most common among younger children. And this has to do with the ability to pronounce the phonemes. Phonemes are the sounds of a language. Graphemes are the written letters and sounds. So like SH is a grapheme and sh is a phoneme. So when we say A-E-I-O-U, those are letters, but those sounds are also phonemes. Most kids don't have really adult speech till they're 5 or 6, some a little bit older than that because human development varies. But speech and language pathologists are the people that really look at younger children and can determine, is this really delayed development or even atypical or not normal development in a child? It's pretty hard to, know as just a lay person what's going on there, because all of us display many of these behaviors. When you were young, you might have said wabbit for rabbit, or TH, son for son. That's not extraordinary, but when it persists beyond a certain age, then there's concern. But that's what articulation disorders are. Has more to do with pronunciations, substituting sounds that aren't actually in the word. Something like if you said bowias, something like that for boy, you're putting extra sounds in, omissions, leaving sounds out, and so on. The main thing is the idea that articulation disorder, and I'm not going to get you on all those other things. It's the substitutions. That's the wabbit for rabbit, the thun for son, and so on. Those are substitutions, and that's what I want you to be most aware of. The other two types, the second more common one that you find in schools is fluency disorder, which is stuttering. The video on stuttering is very good. It's about 8 or 9 minutes, and you can see the two basic types of stuttering. One, which we all do as young children, particularly when we're excited. The child wants to say something and they go, we went to, they repeat the initial sound. People tend to outgrow that, obviously. The other is blocking, and that's when you see a person really struggling to get sound or word out. And that sometimes leads to what are called facial mannerisms or facial tics, where one will be like the eyes going up, rolling up, and where the one little boy is really, he's like, you can see, physically on their face, you can see the the struggle that they're going through to get the words out. So fluencies or disorders are the second most common. What's pretty rare in schools are voice disorders. There is a video of a 14-year-old girl with dysphonia. She literally cannot produce speech. She just is not using, I can't remember exactly now, she actually has some anatomical thing that had to be corrected, but she can't produce speech very loud enough for people to hear. And you actually see her through the course of getting therapy, and eventually she is able to talk. There's another one which is called Singing Will Give You Vocal Nodules. So that kind of disorder is more common among maybe adolescents, but mostly older people. I don't mean necessarily as old as I am, but they're people who abuse their voices. So those of you who are football fans, you know who Ed Ogeron is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the head football coach for LSU. And if you've heard him talk, his voice is like, I can't diagnose him, but he sure sounds like he's got vocal nodules. You get those from abusing your voice, and you can see how a coach could easily abuse their voice by yelling and so on. So singers, cheerleaders, anybody who talks loud or yells a lot, or strains their voice can get vocal nodules. So the key is to know there's a difference between a speech disorder, there's articulation, voice, and fluency disorders. And language disorders can be receptive or expressive. And then a person could have both speech and language disorders. Kids who are on IEPs for just these disorders are usually on there for articulation issues. Younger children that the speech and language pathologist works with. And you see a brief video of a little girl named Grace who's getting articulation therapy for substituting sounds. And I think it has to do with the R sound or the R phoneme, the sound. And oops, lost my thought. Phew, senior moment right out of my head. Okay. The language disorders I mentioned, receptive. Again, it's not a problem with your actual hearing. You hear what's being said, but it's your ability to process it. So, for example, with a child, you might say, I want you to pick up your book, go put it in your cubby, and bring back a piece of paper with a pencil. And the child just loses track. You might think they're not complying when reality is they just couldn't process that many steps in that particular command that you give them. Or maybe they go and put the book in the cubby and then they just kind of stand there and wonder because they didn't process the rest of it. And then expressive, again, having to do with your speech. So and by the way, be sure you watch these videos. They explain the picture's worth 1,000 words. And there'll be items on your quiz related to the videos on speech and language as well. Okay? Make sure you've watched those. All righty. The other thing that I want to talk about, which is a language disorder, because it can really put people off in everyday life. I'm not just talking about teaching or professional stuff, just everyday life, is issues with pragmatics. pragmatics has to do with not your speech necessarily. It has more to do with how you use speech and language in social contexts. Lauren, the case study with Lauren was an example. Most of you in your papers mentioned that she had difficulty interacting. She put other kids off by the way she interacted with him, yelling or interrupting or doing those kinds of things. Those are pragmatics issues. Don't read people's nonverbal signals. Much of our communication's nonverbal. And some people, like if a person's, you're talking to them and they keep looking at their watch and they're kind of backing up and looking at the door, they're communicating, I need to go somewhere. And you pick up on that if you've got good pragmatics. So being able to start a conversation, carry on a conversation with give and take, know when to end a conversation, like in that example I just gave. These are all pragmatics, and you will find those being issues with students with specific learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and emotional behavioral disorders for sure. They don't use their communication skills in social context very well at all. Some, I won't say everybody, but many of them do not. And that leads to not having friends, having not the best rapport with your teachers. You can be really, really misunderstood person because your pragmatics are really out of whack and you're not interacting with people the way other people expect a person to normally interact. All righty. So again, be sure you view those videos. Any questions about chapter 7?
When is our quiz for this?
Your quiz there's an announcement a ways back that says, I think it's called schedule for the remainder of the semester. The quiz on chapter 6 and 7 will be next Thursday. The time frame will be the same, like 8 to 11:59. I will extend the time, and I'll try to make sure the study guide is a little more specific. Obviously, I'm not going to list every little thing, but I'm trying to give you enough clues now, and I will do it in writing. And try to make sure the wording of my sentences isn't as confusing as apparently what several people mentioned. Speaking of language, not that you have language disorders, but that I was putting things in a way that made it difficult to understand what I was actually asking. So I will endeavor to do a better job with that. So it'll be next Thursday because technically Friday is supposed to be a holiday, spring break day, the Friday before Easter, Good Friday. All righty. So next week, I am going to give you, by our meeting next week, I'm going to give you a definite answer on whether or not you're going to have a final assignment. I'm kind of going back and forth on that a little bit. Tell me how you're doing in your other classes. Are you keeping up?
Not gonna lie, it's a struggle because we're not at school and it's it's on our own time, but I mean, I feel like everyone's surviving.
Yeah. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Is it like I've got a lot of more work to do because I'm not?
Yeah.
I've a little bit,
A lot more written work, those kinds of things.
There's a lot more tests.
A lot more.
I had to do a ton of theater notes, so
Yeah.
5 seconds.